Welcome, everybody, to Confluence of Worlds with Bryan Rector. And today, first, this is kind of the launch of our show. And so the vision behind it is that back long ago, Wilsonville, Oregon, Wilsonville High School, myself and Amelia Bishop have to throw in MEB, who's now herself an athlete at Seattle Pacific playing hoops. But we had this idea about the intersection of faith with sports, right? Because many of you know about FCA or AIA or different organizations that help further the platform and kind of the understanding of how faith and the gospel connect with athletics. And so we thought, how good would it be to kind of figure that out and, make something out of it? So we had this idea that we kind of tinkered with and went away from, and eventually it matriculated into Confluence of Worlds. Now, the idea behind that name is that confluence, right, the intersection of rivers. And so my kind of idea, Julia, and I'll introduce you in a second more fully, but was that at the confluence of rivers, right, we often hear of God or of Jesus as the living water, right? And so I thought, at the intersection of that, you also have faith, you have athletics, and then you have a third chapter, which is, a large part of what we'll talk about today, but NIL, name, image, likeness, which essentially, for those of you who don't know, is how athletes in college can be compensated through their, of course, name, image, likeness, and how they use their platform to connect with businesses, do community outreach, and such. So without further ado, I'm here with Michigan State Junior, a setter on the volleyball team, Julia Bishop. Now, Julia, I'm so curious. What inspired you to come on the show, and what are you kind of excited to talk about today?
Yeah, I'm really excited just to talk about the importance of knowing that there's so much more to life than athletics. And I think NIL really shows that for all the athletes, and just knowing that everything you do in NIL and everything you can earn and the compensation is all just leading you into life after sport. And I think my faith comes in a long way with that, and we'll talk about definitely here. But I don't know, you reached out and I was very excited and intrigued about this, so I'm really excited to be here.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. And folks, just so you know, our hope is that we can bring guests just like Julia with the same type of inspiring stories on with almost each week. Now, of course, that's contingent upon athletic schedules. Mm-hmm. I know that you were just in Connecticut.
Yep.
Talk to me about that trip. How was that? And that was your first big road one. So
we went 3-0 for the weekend, which is really big because we're going into Big Ten play this weekend. But I think it was really good. We're ending on a really high note with the postseason, or preseason. So now going into Big Ten play with the first road game at Michigan is going to be big. So I think we're ready to go, and I'm excited to see it.
Mm-hmm. And for Michigan State volleyball, definitely a change that's been made within the last couple of years is Coach Johnson coming in.
Yeah.
And I was curious, oftentimes when coaching switches happen and programs are redefined, there's a question of leaving maybe. Yeah. There's a question of not being able to play as much as you once had. So I guess right inside that question is how did you feel about the change that was made? And, what were some ways using your background in faith that you kind of came to terms with that?
Yeah. I think I saw a lot of different reactions. A lot of my teammates all jumped in the portal right away because they just wanted to go somewhere that was comfortable, where they knew who the coach was, they knew what the team was like, they knew everything they needed to know. And I just I've sat and prayed on it a lot of times. I talked to my parents about it. My mom is a big inspiration for me with my faith. She's a very strong Catholic. And we just kind of sat and talked about it and prayed together and just said, God, you put me here for a reason. Is your reason changing? Or is your path flowing a different way? Please just guide me, ease my mind, help me just see what you have in store for me. And I think that was hard because seeing all my friends leave, it kind of made me think, okay, is God also telling me to leave? Or is God telling me to stay and work on my resiliency? It was hard because I was trying to figure out what God was trying to show me. But then as soon as Coach got hired, it kind of really settled my mind because she actually recruited me at her old school, Illinois State. And she offered me there when I was 14. So I think that kind of made me realize I was oh, wow, God, you're bringing in a coach that I already have a connection with. So that kind of made me realize this is a commitment I already made when I was 15, and this is something that I want to stick through and see what else I have planned. And if God changes my plan later on, he'll voice it to me. I know he will. So I think that's been really big for me, but it's been great. A big difference than our old coach. There's been a lot of differences there. And obviously the new players coming in, a lot of international players coming in. It's been a change. But I think that's just helped me grow a lot as a person and as a leader. I had an opportunity to be a leader as an 18-year-old my freshman year. And that's something you don't see until, junior, senior year usually. So I think that was big for me because I was one of 7 that spring of my freshman year. So being able to really carry a big voice on the team at 18 years old was remarkable, and I'm really excited that I had that opportunity.
I think what you just said highlighted so many things in my mind that I really want to unpack.
Yeah.
The first of which is you said being committed and being recruited by 14, 15. Being a youth and having that, early kind of understanding that I'm going to the next level. I have options here.
Yep.
How did you navigate that, and what were kind of the experiences that you would want to highlight in someone who's in that position coming forward?
Yeah, so actually back in the day when I was being recruited, the rules were you can start talking to coaches as early as you want, as long as it's initiated by the player. So I can call any coach I want, I can email or text whatever I want, and they can answer as long as I initiate it. But now the rules have changed. They can't talk until June of your sophomore summer. But when I started being recruited, that was my 13th year. I'm constantly just on the phone with adults trying to vouch for myself where I didn't even know where I was going to high school. And I think that was like a very eye-opening experience because you're being told like, okay, what do you want to major? And I'm still trying to figure out where I want to go to high school and all that kind of stuff. But it was hard because you have to deal with knowing you're going to the next level, which is an amazing feeling, but also knowing, okay, I still am working to make my varsity high school team. Okay, I'm still trying to be a normal kid and go trick-or-treating and all these normal things. So I think that was hard at first and trying to balance that. I know me and my family had a lot of arguments about it because I was trying to be very independent in it, but I was very immature. So I didn't know how to approach a school I didn't want to go to, how to like respectfully decline, but not feel like I was letting the world down because at that age, everything felt like it was the biggest weight on your shoulder. But being in a Catholic school and being in a really faith-centered relationship with a bunch of friends and a bunch of mentors, every single time that something went wrong, or it was like this one school I really wanted to go to, it fell through. I always just talk to some of my mentors, talk to some of my like really faith, like mentors is a good word. I really just talked to them and they kind of just grounded me and was like, okay, that's God closing a door for you. Like he didn't want you there. So why are you upset about the door closing? And I was like, because I wanted this. And like, yes, you're putting your wants above God's. Like, seriously, think that's a smart idea? And I'm like, okay, you're right. But I think that was just a really eye-opening experience because doing all that at such a young age makes you realize that you want all these things for your life, and how many times in my life that I put what I wanted so much more above what God had planned for me. And I think that's just something that I still struggle with to this day, is knowing that like I want this, and God's like, I'm closing this door for a reason. Like, stop trying to find your way around it. But yeah, that's what I would say.
I was curious. It's like for me, my understanding of my faith came from surgeries I've had and medical procedures over time. That started from 1 month old on, but I didn't recognize it until, as you said, 14, 15, that feels like that's about that age. I was curious, like, what came first for you? Was it your identity in Christ, or was it your identity as an athlete? And how do you try and keep those grounded?
I think it definitely started with identity as an athlete. I got all my worth by all the awards I won, all of the schools I got offers from, like all these really exterior things that had nothing to do with what actually will genuinely make me happy, which is obviously the Lord. But I think it never really clicked for me until I got to college, which is super late. I mean, 14, 15, I started realizing, okay, this is something I want to look into, but I didn't know how to. I didn't have the resources to really dig deep into a good relationship with the Lord. I always just kind of had those classes where you like learn about the traditions, the rules, like all these kind of things where it turns into a very negative approach towards religion. But I think when I got to college, it turned to a lot more of, okay, this is all about my relationship with God, and it can be a lot different than someone else's. Freshman year, the first time I went to AIA, I was brought by Becca Holdran. She was like, hey, like I heard you're Catholic, you want to go to AIA? Like, and I was like, I don't know anyone, let's go. I just want to meet people. And I think from that moment on, the very first time we talked about, like, where is my identity? And I was like, oh, it's 100% in the Lord. Like, I know it is. But I think that was just me tricking myself to make me feel good. And like, okay, this is exactly what I want. Is I want my relationship with God to be number one. But I think the more I went, the more I started feeling kind of like embarrassed because I knew it wasn't true. And I just kind of kept telling myself, no, it's right. You're doing great. But then I realized I was like, okay, there's so much more than just me as an athlete. And in college, it's so hard to see that because of 20 hour at least a week of practicing. And then you have games on the weekend where you're on national television. You have people wanting to talk to you about all this thing. Like all the world is spinning at that point. And I think just being able to like recenter yourself and realize that like, okay, my identity is not at all about me as an athlete. It is completely about me and my relationship with the Lord. And I think that's something I'm still trying to grow in today, but I've made remarkable growth from freshman year to now.
Mm-hmm. I think Michigan State being, and a lot of you out there are familiar with what Michigan State has been known for, unfortunately, in the negative light over time, just through being a secular campus, right, and not having a faith-based background. So I'm curious, would you say that the university and the institutions that are in place, like AIA, have helped you foster, growth within your faith? And, what are the challenges of trying to pave that way and generate some more support and acknowledgement for the ways that God is working on a campus such as Michigan State that has its priorities in other places?
Yeah. I think the hardest thing is when it comes to faith, community is so important. And I think my sister she just graduated from Seton Hall, which is a Catholic school. And we always talk about the differences. And I talk about how when I go to church at St. John's, it's a lot more of older people. And I'm in the middle of a college town. I always question it. I'm like, how am I in the middle of a college town? And I'm the only 20-year-old here. And she's like, yeah, well, I go to church and they're all 20 to 25-year-olds. And I'm like, that's just the difference where you don't see it until you go to a place like AA and if the room is packed with just a bunch of athletes who are all religious who you never even thought of. You're just oh, I just saw you play on TV and I never even knew that faith was very important to you. So I think that's just something that the university can definitely grow with and be able to really use I don't know how to say it, but to be able to use each person's spirituality and find connections within it. Because whenever you have freshman dorms, the first thing everyone talks about is what's your interest? What's your thing? Maybe there's a way that the university can find if there is a commonality between spirituality there. Because I think that would definitely help. Because I know there's a lot of people from my high school who went to a Catholic school who are here and now they don't practice anymore. And I wish that they would just come to church one more time and they would find their way back into faith. But I don't know. It's something that's very important that isn't talked about much at MSU.
I think this is a really good point to shift into a conversation about NIL and about the things that are related to compensation. Because, it's the old both verse and adage, right? Do work, for the glory of God and glorify Him through all things. And I'm curious when we're looking at, being an athlete through the perspective of it's my career, I'm headed to professional levels, which is what a lot of people have as aspirations, is how have you found an ability to connect with people and to, use this sort of content creation individualism era to further your overarching purpose?
I think since NIL is rather new, it's been 2 years I think have been around. I think you see a lot of different athletes take a bunch of different approaches when it comes to it. You have a couple athletes who just want as much money as they can, right? This is now an opportunity for them to just rake in as much money as possible. And then you also see other athletes who, I'll drop a name out there, Nathan Carter. He's on the football team. He's at AIA. And I just saw his Instagram post today, and he just posted something. And he always has Bible verses in his captions. But he also had a tag, which was I think it was some company that had a bracelet about there's a verse on there or something. But I think he was a prime example of what NIL should be used for those athletes who faith is very important to them. I think it opens up doors for you to use your platform to not just make money, but you can make money for a purpose if that's something that's interested you. But you can also make money to really show what's important to you, and which is the overarching goal of like life with the Lord and eternity with the Lord. So I think that was something that I've been talking to Darian. I've been talking to a bunch of different people about, and how to get NILs, but how to get NILs with what's important to you, because there's a difference of going and trying to advertise yourself for something that's just going to make you money, and something you can advertise yourself because it's important to you, because that'll give you two different types of ways to go about it mentally. So that's something that I've been trying to figure out, is maybe there's a Christian apparel company that I can like try and brand a little bit, or is there, like, I know like I always wear like Oh Jesus Do bracelets, like is there something I can do with that that's able to just like help show people, show my followers on Instagram, show whoever that like God is important to me, and I'm able to live this life of athlete, student, constantly being like interviewed, talk to, all these things, but also know that like it's all just to glorify, you know. So I think NIL has been very unique and very changing.
That's amazing. You know, there's actually a story that I would love to tell you from a meeting I had with Darian Harris, who I believe his title is Associate Director of Athletics at Michigan State. And also he's kind of carved his own path with being the director and kind of advisor of NIL. And so as you said, you had a conversation with him. Well, yesterday, my conversation with him was very wide-ranging. And one of the stories he told me was that an athlete at Michigan State called him, and trust me, I want to get your perspective on this.
Yeah.
There was an athlete at Michigan State who was driving somewhere on a highway, who broke down in their car and called Darian. And the first thing out of the athlete's mouth was, "Can you send me some NILs so that we can get this fixed?"
Oh my gosh.
And so Darian's telling me the story about how the fact is that people are misunderstanding what NIL does. And I think you did an amazing job explaining kind of how it works and, you know, the connection. But it's not a noun. It's not, it doesn't exist. It's not a person, place, or thing. It's fairy dust, you know. That story got me to tears in his office.
That just shows that so many athletes just misconstrue what this means, and like what the opportunities really bring to the table. Like, people are just so money grabbing now that it's kind of, and it's easy to think like that now. This is because it is so new, because how many of the Michigan basketball team who like somehow sold money like 20 years ago and like lost their titles and all this stuff. But now we get the chance to, so they're like, I want to take advantage of it because of the history of all these things. But I think taking advantage of NIL and really using NIL to help grow your brand and grow what you want to grow is just completely different.
You know, let's go rapid fire.
Okay.
What are a couple verses that you lean on, that you rely on, and that might, you know, potentially have some connection to what we're talking about?
I think I am the way, the light, and the truth is the biggest one. I always get them mixed up, so fix it if you need to. But I think that's I think the very first one that always comes to my mind, because whenever things go wrong in my life, I get very caught in of, God, why me? Why this? Why does this always happen? Like, I just tend to blame, and I sometimes have to just settle down, pray, and be like, God, I know you've got me. I always say, God's got me. God's got me. And I think that's something that's like, He is the way, He is the truth, He is the light, He is everything that I need in life, but I tend to put so many things above Him. And I think every single time I hear that verse, or I go to church and that's somehow in the homily or the sermon, I'm automatically like, okay, yep, I hear you loud and clear again. I think that's the first one that definitely comes to my head that makes me just recenter really quickly. And that one's grateful. I'm very grateful that one's said a lot. But yeah.
You know, because obviously we touched on off camera a little bit. You know, something that I do around Michigan State are being a part of games and, you know, practices and programs in different capacities, but mainly media stuff. And I know that you've had the experience of appearing at media days for volleyball. And so I wanted to know is like, what kind of happened there? What was it like for you to be a leader, you know, in a different avenue than on the court or in the church or in the classroom, somewhere that maybe you don't always get the chance to do? And kind of what were your takeaways from that experience?
Yeah, it was a crazy experience because you walk into the Big Ten headquarters and you just have like rows of people who are about to ask you questions, and then you quickly go from that room to a live studio, answer more questions, and you go to another back room, and it's just bouncing all over the place where it gets very overwhelming. But I think the biggest part that I really took away is that like God trusted me to be in this position, and I was really worried because I was like, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? Like, what if I say the wrong thing? But then I prayed before it, and I was like, God, just take control of my words right now. Like, I am fully yours right now. You just tell me what I need to say, kind of thing. And I think I really noticed that in the live interview because I kind of just freaked out during that. I was like, it's live TV. This guy just asked me questions. I have no idea what he's asking. Like, it was very scary because anything can be said. And I think the hardest thing is whenever I get asked about, like, comparing the old coaches and new coaches, like, that's a very touchy conversation where you can easily, if you say one thing out of place, it can go either way. So I think I really had just put my trust in God and just be like, take over right now because I need you. But it was really cool being able to be that leader who's able to vouch for the entire team and be able to show like everyone who's watching where we're going, because obviously with our record last year, it wasn't what we wanted, and it's very easy to just see that record and automatically assume that it's going to be kind of like that again this year. So to be able to go to these places and answer these questions of, okay, how did your record last year, how is that affecting you this year? All these kind of questions, and to be able to try and persuade them, but that's not the right word, not persuade them, but you want to just show them that what you've been doing off camera is going to finally show up on camera. And that's the hardest thing because everyone's mind is so focused on the Big Ten is the best volleyball conference. So they're focused on like the top 5 teams automatically. So the other half, they're just kind of like, oh, if they have a good win, then we'll look at you. And I think to be able to use your words to show that side of the story that they haven't seen yet was so important and like a new experience for me because I never had to like vouch for that in that way. But that's why I prayed to God a lot that day. I was like, need you extra right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, I know one thing that you just touched on right there actually was the growth of Big Ten volleyball.
Yes.
And the understanding that this conference is premier and it's growing even a little bit more with the addition of the 4 schools that are coming in, you know, as soon as next year.
Yep.
But what was coursing through your mind? I have to know after seeing Nebraska play outdoors in front of 93,000, some ridiculous number. What were you thinking, and kind of how did you feel about the growth and where the game's going?
I think I just realized how blessed I am to be playing in this sport at this time. Because obviously in women's athletics, it's a lot less looked at. But when you look at volleyball, we are right up there with every other sport. I think in the Big Ten, it goes football, basketball, volleyball is right away. And I think that's been just crazy. Like right when you watched it, I was like, whoa, there's a lot of people there. And then I kind of sat in it for a little bit, and then I saw all the posts come out, and they were like, 93,000, all these numbers. And I'm like, knowing that all those people are there to support volleyball is an eye-opening experience because that just shows how many people support women's athletics and how many people support just the game of volleyball. I think volleyball is the most common sport that youth girls play, is I think the most recent stat that I heard that I was like, oh, wow, like I never even thought about that. But then when you hear things like that, you're like, you realize the position you're in and the things like you complain about, I have to go to practice like this day. And then I realized like 5 years ago, I would have been thrilled to be in the position I am today. And I think things like that make me kind of just take a step back and realize that I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. And all God's doing, like 100%. Like he put me here for a reason. He had this goal in mind. And if his goal right now is to me in this interview right now, talk about my faith, because I am not one of the people that are very like, I'm going to go out there and show everyone that I am a follower of God, even though I want to be. I'm not one of the people that are very confident that I'm just radiating joy 100% in that regard. And I think this is a big step for me. And this is something that God was really like, I want you to do this because this is going to help you be more confident to be able to share the good news that I'm trying to have you share. So, yeah.
Well, I just have to say, like, folks, if you can take anything away from this interview, take that. Because it's that small step of faith. And that's something that, you know, was a direction I wanted to go, was inciting that. And so to have heard that with interview 1 with you, I mean, that's unbelievable. Like, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for saying that. I think you caught my attention again, which I so appreciate because I feel like we're working on this wavelength. Is you talked about being where your feet are,
yes,
and staying, in the same place, on the same street, focusing on what you're doing in the present. I want to change that narrative for a second.
Okay.
We're in junior year. We're both juniors, Michigan State,
Yep.
and getting ready, quote unquote, for the next step.
Yep.
Where are you going?
I think that's a good question because my mind was very set on I wanted to be a pilot. I want to be in aviation, so I started doing that junior year of high school. That was like a crazy story on how I got into that, but I did. And then, unfortunately, I was committed here before the fact that I knew I wanted to be a pilot because we don't have aviation school here. But then I went to business school because I was like, I'm just going to get a degree and just hopefully something good and then do all my flying lessons after school. But then I switched my majors sophomore year to computational data analytics. Fancy name, but it's in engineering. But it's basically doing computer science with a bunch of math. And I think that was something that I was like, okay, I like coding. This is kind of fun. I want to do something with it. But now my narrative kind of changed again, where the things I deal with as an athlete makes me realize that I want to be a college coach. And I think being on both sides, I've been a starter, I've been a bench warmer. I've been both on and off whenever for 3 years. And I think that really gives me a different perspective because a lot of times college coaches come from the glorious college background where like, oh, they've been an All-American, oh, they were a 4-year starter, like all these things. But I think I see both perspectives because I've had one coach, I've had another coach, I've been a captain, I've been not a captain, I've been a freshman who played right away, and I've been a sophomore who didn't play. So I think I've had so many different narratives and different stories that I'm able to really relate with different people. So I think my goal's kind of shifting a little bit, but give me a week and it might change. Yeah, who knows?
And I think that's just such a key is we understand from all of our advisors everywhere that it is common to change, and it's uncommon to be able to adapt.
Yeah.
And so I have a ton of respect for you having done that and kind of navigated what that looks like. If you were to run a program, or let's say you're the head coach at Michigan State in 2032, just for instance, what is a leading value that you want to instill in all of your players?
I think the biggest thing that I would instill would be just to be able to have a sense of vulnerability. I think as an athlete, you're known for putting a face on all the time, and that's either a face that everything's fine when it's not, or it's a face of, okay, I'm not upset about an error that I just had because I'm a professional at this point now. Like I shouldn't be having those errors, so I'm not going to react a certain way. But I think I would just instill that with my team that it's okay to be fully vulnerable in these, like in certain places, like especially when you're in our gym or in our offices or wherever you'd be. Like I want you to be fully vulnerable. Tell me exactly what you're feeling. Are you not okay mentally because I said something? Then let's talk about it. Let's figure this out. I think that's something that coach is kind of implementing that a lot. Like I'm able to tell her, hey, I didn't like when you said this to me, or I'd be like, hey, I don't think I interpreted this correctly. Like maybe you were meant this, but I interpreted it as this, and it really has been sticking with me. But she says this thing that I think I would definitely implement with my team is like the 48-hour rule, which is if something's on your mind for 2 days, then that needs to be addressed because otherwise it's going to stay on your mind. It's going to keep eating you alive. But I think that would be something, the vulnerability, and just be able to, if there's something that needs to be said, say it. And not having a sense of fear. How would I react? Or how would coach think about this? Or how would my team feel if they found out that I think about this or I fear this? I think that'd be something because at the end of the day, I spend however many hours a week with my team. And I think I've still been lacking in the vulnerability standpoint and showing them like, I also fear this. Although I have that captain face where everything's great and everything's fine. Yes, yesterday I did just bomb a quiz and I didn't bring that into practice. I shouldn't bring it into practice, but also you should know that I'm still stressed about it, or you should know that it's still bothering me outside of practice. So yeah, vulnerability 100%.
This sort of mental side is something that I think from an outsider looking in is most captivating about the Michigan State volleyball program. And one of those initiatives I'm not sure if you know where I'm going with this.
I don't know yet.
Yeah, see, we got to go. Is player not a piece.
Oh, yes.
And the amount of chess work that you guys have done What has that kind of instilled in terms of mental training and approach?
Yeah. So I actually was in chess club from 1st grade to 8th grade.
Okay, I want this to go on record, y'all. I'm not laughing at her. I'm laughing with her. Okay?
Exactly.
She broke into a chuckle. I had to agree.
Yep.
That was kind of funny.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Yeah, so I was in chess club just because my parents couldn't pick me up from school at a certain time. So I was like, I'm just going to join. Why not? But me and my dad played. So he was like, you should do it. Like, that'd be fun. And we kind of just played because we knew that, like, it helps you with strategy. It helps you with processing. Like, we just thought it would help me at some point in my life. And then I got here and we started talking about bringing chess into the program. And I was like, kind of confused on where we're going with this since, like, I played before and I was like, I don't know how we can relate a chess game to volleyball. But then Seth came in and he started showing us exactly how to move things. And the first day was super slow because I already knew how to do everything. I was like, okay, we got it. Next point, like, help me out. Like, we're past that. But then he kind of started showing us that, like, okay, well, if you move this, how does that relate to moving a set in volleyball? Or, like, say that we have this strategy here, this opening, how does that relate to this play set in volleyball? And I started, like, having to correlate that. And as a setter, like, I take a lot of pride with our offense. So I see, like, things I do in chess correlate exactly to how things go in volleyball. So if in chess, I tend to struggle with the end game. I tend to struggle with trying to just finish on checkmate. People move around, I end up somehow stalemating and tying them. I don't know how, but it ends up happening all the time. But then it correlated exactly with me when it comes to 2020 in a game. I tend to sometimes make a little bit slower decisions, which obviously puts us at a disadvantage, or I don't make as clean as movements. Mm-hmm. And I think that's been starting to make me realize that, okay, I'm playing a game, but the game is just the same thing as what I'm doing mentally there as what I'm doing there. So I think that was super cool because now I'm able to focus on this. When I'm playing chess, we play before every film session. We play at least like 2 or 3 games every practice almost. And I think playing so much has helped me improve my chess game. But then it made me more mentally aware of the things that I struggle with in chess. And then it makes me correlate it with the things I struggle with in volleyball, which has a crazy, astonishing number of correlation. Mm-hmm. But it's been super interesting because every single time we have a meeting with Seth, he always gives us like another tidbit that we need to focus on. And the one he gave us yesterday was almost winning isn't actually winning. And I was like, oh, okay, you're right. Because how many games last year did I say, oh, we only lost by 2? Or we lost a couple sets by 2? And that's not winning. That's almost winning. It's still an L in the record book. And I was like, okay, that's exactly how I saw chess too. I almost won that game, but that doesn't matter. So I think it's been a crazy experience because it's something I've done my entire life, but I didn't realize how important and how much of correlation there was until I actually was told to like focus on it like that.
You know, a way that I view games like that, and actually you just hit on it again, so I'm incredibly fortunate to be here right now and hear that, is like chess and the moves that you make can be correlated. That's a word that I love that you use as communication style. Mm-hmm. And you're telling that person across the table about you, and you're learning about who they are. You know, you talk about that's one instance. Then on the volleyball court, you're communicating in a different way. Mm-hmm. That's similar largely, but I want to go somewhere that we haven't gone. Is like communicating with different people on the court. Mm-hmm. And I think you said it much earlier, but different players from different cultures and different countries. What is that like? And just tell me about that for a quick second.
It is amazing because bringing in so many different cultures, you see like just so much of life in a different perspective because things that I see as completely normal, my roommate who's from New Zealand is like, what is going on right now? And I think it makes you just realize like how fortunate you are to be playing like in the United States and how they've worked their entire life to have this opportunity to be in the United States and like to get an education from here. But it's been really awesome to be able to like communicate with them and like be able to hear their voice grow because coming in, a lot of people who struggle with English at first, everyone's English is great, but I think their confidence in it was very slim. They were very lacking in that regard. Sure. They just never felt comfortable enough in their English to be able to speak up and really voice their opinion on matters. But now, the more we go into it, the more they realize, okay, like, I do have a voice here. I am respected here. Even if my English is terrible when I say it, everyone's still going to listen or be like, okay, say it again one more time. and not at all in a mean way, but just a way of like, we want to hear what you have to say. So I think seeing each person's growth in that regard has been amazing and such a cool experience to watch, like firsthand, especially coming from a captain who's like been the one to always be the voice whenever things are quiet. Everyone just turns to me right away. But then there's times now where you see like some of our players from Turkey who've been here for 2 years now that they feel comfortable enough to be like, hey, no, I got this right now. And they'll say something. And I think it's just amazing to see that growth and that like confidence boost in them.
You know, I want to say something to you and to anyone who's listening. It's like, I just tricked you guys. And here's how I did that, is we went to a place that we hadn't gone before, but I promised in my head we would bring it back. So the question outside of what you just said is this: have you found a way to communicate biblical messages and some theology to those players, and what is their spiritual background like that you've noticed, if you have, coming from different cultures and countries?
So I actually had a really good conversation with my roommate Taylor Hold'em, who's the New Zealander. And we kind of talked about, because she actually, I don't know if anyone knows this, from New Zealand, there's not really like a big faith background there at all. She said that very little people even believe that Jesus is like a thing. And I was very like confused. I was like, oh, really? Like there's not any religion there? There's not like Christianity? There's like nothing? She's like, none of her friends that have any idea about it. And I was like, really? Like, so like you don't know anything? She's like, nothing. So then I started like taking that as an opportunity. I was like, okay, I'm going to tell you a little about Jesus. And she was like, okay, I've heard a little bit through like TikTok or like Instagram, like all these different social media platforms. And she kind of hears the name. She gets a little bit. She understands like Jesus died for our sins, the most common things, the most like universal things that people know. But I think I've really taken this to heart where I'm like, okay, like every time that I have a chance to kind of slip something in there, I'll slip it in there. And then she's been starting to get a lot more eager with asking questions about it, which has been really cool because you're seeing God start working through her and like lighting that flame in her, that like burning desire to like learn about Jesus is starting to like really take over a little bit. And almost weekly we have a conversation about it at some point, which has been really exciting. And I'll probably give it a couple more weeks and then see if I can take her out to AA once and see if that also keeps that fire burning. But I think that's something that I saw from her firsthand that made me realize that, like it's even in countries that don't know a lot about it, God still puts a little flame in there and just waiting for it to get ignited.
Gosh, I love that.
I know.
Thank you. Wow. I mean, now we're getting to a place where it's cross-cultural. And at that point, it's like, I mean, there's nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
I don't want to take much more of your time. I know that we've just been working and, dissecting these things. But one last quick thing is, I know that there's a quote I just heard. And actually, it's from Coach Deion Sanders over at Colorado, who's kind of been sweeping the nation. A lot of people kind of throw out this, mindset about Deion that he's boastful and that he's arrogant. But my antithesis to that is listen to him speak. He boasts about the Lord. And it's kind of that gray area, right? Of like you run your mouth, but everything he does is centered in that. And one of the things he said is that, and I'm sure it's probably been said by somebody, I won't say it's from him, but I heard him say that he looks at role models as models that fill a role. And when I heard that, I went, oh, it's all clicking because the centerpiece has to be Jesus in your life. Who are some of the people that you see as role models or models that fill a role, being that they're secondarily to what Christ's example is for you? And what are some shout outs just before we exit here?
Yeah, I think my sister is a big one for me because she took a big leap of faith and trusted the Lord to be able to go to school in New Jersey, which was very unheard of for my family. We're a very tight-knit family. We have 9 people total. Like, I only have one cousin, or I have 2 cousins, but one is not very in relationship with us very much anymore. But she decided to take that leap of faith to go to a private Catholic school in New Jersey, which is very expensive. We knew that it was going to be a lot of work to be able to pay off. But I think that was just something that she was like, I need to go to a Catholic school. I need to be able to have that private school vibe where I can make sure that I'm growing in my faith. I'm still taking those classes that I want to take and be supported around with such a good community that just wants to see her grow in her faith. just as much as they want to see her grow like in the classroom. But I think I see her as that person I automatically go to when I feel like maybe my relationship with the Lord isn't where I want it to be. I automatically go to her and be like, hey, how can I do this? How do I get in the Bible more? How do I, maybe I can't get in the Bible right now. How do I still grow with my relationship with the Lord? And she actually gave me the idea of I'm now the one leading the prayers before games, which has been new for me because Becca usually was the one doing it the past 2 years. And we talked about this before a season with my sister, and she was like, well, why don't you take lead on it? And I was like, I don't know, like, I'm usually not that one. Like, I don't, she was like, well, why can't you be that one? And I was like, okay, you're right. And I think from that moment forward, she kind of like role modeled that for me, where she was like, okay, well, look, I've done this to put myself in an uncomfortable position where I didn't feel like everything was going to go 100% the way I wanted to. But again, that's you putting your wants above God's. Like, this is God telling you there's an opportunity right here that you have the chance to be able to go and say exactly what you need to say in this prayer that a lot of my team aren't followers. But I'm able to say a little bit where God is able to work through my voice to be able to maybe inspire them, maybe light that fire, maybe you don't know, but hopefully take them somewhere that they haven't gone yet.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, unbelievable. I want from the bottom of my heart to say thank you so much.
Thank you
for having this conversation with me. Obviously, as you guys know, I mean, I hope it's not information overload, but that's how much information we could write down. And I'm so thankful for your perspective. I'm actually, like, legitimately, I'm tearing up. And the reason is, for so long, we talked about at the front of the show, like, this is an idea that we've had for a couple years, found a way to get it off the ground a little bit, and then found the first person who would be able to break it down with me. And I was told all the way since last year, because I said to you, I asked Clark, Jocelyn, who's now head coach at Central Michigan, big guy over there in Mount Pleasant, I said, who is it that would be categorized as a leader on these three fronts? And he said, Julia. And I just have to tell you, I know why.
Thank you.
And I'm so thankful. And I hope that, every conversation going forward can be as fruitful as this. And, that's it for Confluence of Worlds with Bryan Rector, and today with Julia Bishop. Unbelievable. I'm blown away. But I hope you guys have a great day, and we'll come back as soon as we possibly can with another one. Thank you.